Welcome to Introduction to Tribal Consultations. By taking this course, you've started on a path to engage in effective and respectful tribal consultation with sovereign tribal nations.
The purpose of this course is to provide a general overview of what tribal consultation is, why it's important, and the best practices for planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out a tribal consultation. Note, however, this training is not meant to be a substitute for locating, referencing, and understanding your own agency's tribal consultation policy. If you are currently not aware of or familiar with your agency's tribal consultation policy, we encourage you to locate, reference, and become familiar with that policy prior to hosting or participating in any tribal consultation.
Indeed, tribal consultation is so important that on November 30, 2022, the President issued a presidential memorandum on uniform standards for tribal consultation, with a directive to provide more consistency in how agencies initiate, provide notice, conduct, record, and report back to tribes on their tribal consultations. In addition, the presidential memorandum also requires all employees who work with tribal nations or on policies with tribal implications to take an annual tribal consultation training course.
This training fulfills this requirement and was developed with direct input from tribal representatives and features interviews with current and former tribal leaders and federal employees. We are grateful to these tribal leaders for sharing their own and their tribe's experiences and views so that you, as federal employees, are better able to understand tribal perspectives when working on matters that intersect with tribal interests. Please note that these tribal leaders joined us as representatives of their sovereign nations and are not providing the views or opinions of the federal government.
Fundamental principles, such as sovereignty and the nation-to-nation relationship between the federal government and tribal nations, are introduced in the Understanding Tribal Treaties and Reserve Rights training course. If you have not already done so, we strongly encourage you to take that course. The overall concept, importance, and practice of tribal consultation is built on those fundamental principles. Therefore, they are essential for you to know and understand as well. In addition, many consultations may include discussion of tribal treaties and reserve rights.
After completing this course, federal employees who work with tribal nations or on policies with tribal implications will be able to explain the concept of tribal consultation and its importance in the nation-to-nation relationship between the federal government and tribal nations, summarize the historic and legal foundations underpinning the development and role of tribal consultation today, as well as the executive policy requirements for conducting tribal consultation, outline the requirements, roles, and responsibilities of agencies when conducting tribal consultations, identify and describe the best practices for planning, preparing, conducting, and closing out tribal consultations. Identify potential resource locations that may help you to make informed decisions in the tribal consultation process. Don't forget that your agency has a consultation policy, and you should become familiar with it. Our course is divided into 4 modules, each focusing on a specific objective. Within each module, we will also provide potential resource locations to help you make informed decisions. Let's get started.
What is tribal consultation? In this module, we will define some key terms and discuss why tribal consultations are important. By the end of this module, you will be able to explain the concept of tribal consultation and its importance in the nation-to-nation relationship between the federal government and tribal nations. Tribal consultation is a formal process of government-to-government dialogue between federal agencies and tribal nations. Its purpose is to ensure that tribal voices are listened to and considered in federal decision-making processes, especially on policies and actions that have tribal implications. Consultation is significant because it respects tribal sovereignty and self-governance. It recognizes the unique legal and political status of tribal nations and their right to self-determination. Effective consultation fosters trust, collaboration, and better policy outcomes.
Here, it is important that we differentiate between three terms: consultations, listening sessions, and public hearings. Consultations. These are formal government-to-government dialogues between the federal government and tribal nations. Consultation recognizes tribal sovereignty and the nation-to-nation relationship between the United States and tribal nations. Consultation also requires that information obtained from tribes be given meaningful consideration, and federal agencies should strive for consensus with tribes or a mutually desired outcome. Further, consultation should include both federal and tribal officials with decision-making authority regarding the proposed policy or action that has tribal implications. Note, it is only tribal consultation if it is conducted with an elected tribal leader or their designee.
Listening sessions. These are less formal meetings where federal agencies can gather input and feedback from tribal representatives and tribal community members. Listening sessions are informative and can be helpful leading up to a consultation. However, they do not qualify as formal government-to-government tribal consultation. Note, a tribal representative could be elected tribal leaders, their designee, or other tribal government staff. Public hearings. These are formal events where federal agencies present information and solicit feedback from the general public. These meetings are open to all and are often part of a broader process. While tribal representatives can elect to participate in these public hearings, these also do not qualify as formal government-to-government tribal consultation. Although listening sessions and public hearings are effective and essential ways to communicate with the public and tribal representatives, they are not and cannot replace formal government-to-government consultation.
Formal government-to-government tribal consultation means acknowledging the nation-to-nation relationship between federally recognized tribes and the United States, acknowledging that the United States owes treaty and trust responsibilities to tribal nations, and recognizing tribal sovereignty as the basis for consultation. When a federal agency is making rules, decisions, or comments on laws that affect tribes, the federal-tribal relationship, or the distribution of power between the federal government and tribes, the agency must conduct formal government-to-government tribal consultation with tribes.
We have a government-to-government relationship with the United States with the trust and treaty obligation that they have to us because we paid it forward with our lands, the lives of our ancestors, and our natural resources. However, the United States doesn't always feel that way. Most federal agencies think it's only the Department of the Interior's responsibility to work with tribes, but it's not. It's every federal agency, entity, and administration. And therefore, we're constantly in a struggle to get them to understand what consultation is and what meaningful consultation is.
During these consultations, agencies are required to listen to tribal views and consider their input on how the proposed policy or action may impact tribal rights or interests. Agencies should also ask tribes how the proposed policy or action might affect their rights. Consultation requires that information obtained from tribes be given meaningful consideration, and agencies should strive for consensus with tribes or a mutually desired outcome. Note: determining whether a tribal consultation is appropriate for a specific policy or action is covered more fully in Module 3.
Regular, meaningful, and robust consultation with tribal nations is essential for the following reasons. It strengthens the federal-tribal government-to-government relationship, which fosters trust and collaboration. Obtaining tribal input leads to better informed policies and actions. It promotes and supports tribal self-governance and the growth of tribal institutions, and recognizes that federal support for tribal self-determination has been the most effective policy for the social and economic growth of tribal nations. Ongoing dialogue facilitates real-time addressing of concerns and mutually agreed-upon solutions and builds trust.
The main takeaway from this module is that consultation is a mutually agreed-upon formal process for decision-making between tribal nations and the federal government that respects the sovereign status of tribal nations and ensures their voices are considered in federal policymaking and actions, promoting collaboration and mutual respect. If you work with tribal nations or policies with potential tribal implications, it is critical that you understand the importance of consultation and its role in the federal decision-making process.
Now you can explain the concept of tribal consultation and its importance in the nation-to-nation relationship between the federal government and tribal nations. Stay tuned for our next module as we delve into the historic and legal foundations underpinning the development and role of tribal consultation today, as well as the executive policy requirements for conducting tribal consultation.